Funding for Shaperillis is provided by Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business.
I love Pikmin so much. It's one of my favoriteest franchises on the whole damn planet. There's just something about this series that just clicks with me. The combination of thrilling real-time strategy and cute critter crowd control is just so tantalizing and terrific. Pikmin 1 is one of my most replayed games of all time, offering such a short but immensely satisfying experience that I can go through over and over again and still have an incredibly fun time on each playthrough. Pikmin 3 is one of my top 10 favorite games of all time, with an equally replayable main story, fantastic updated mechanics, and a boatload of addicting as all hell challenge stages that offer near endless amounts of fun as you try and beat your old times and improve your high scores. Pikmin 4 is quite literally my most anticipated video game of all time, and its 30-second teaser trailer is probably my pick for Game of the Year 2022. I even pour a ton of time into Pikmin Bloom. It's such a delightful walking companion app that encourages me to constantly exercise and discover new landmarks in the world around me, all while introducing some of the cutest gosh darn decor Pikmin you've ever seen. And Pikmin 2? It's good. You know, it's a fine enough game. I'll replay it every few years or so. Yeah, Pikmin 2 isn't really my cup of tea compared to the other mainline games. It's not a bad game, far from it, and it's still definitely very important to the Pikmin franchise, offering a ton of new characters and concepts that are core aspects of the franchise's identity. But in a lot of ways, I kind of feel like it missed the point of what made the first game special. And with the added context of Pikmin 3 borrowing a lot more of Pikmin 1's game design philosophy than Pikmin 2's, I feel like nowadays when I look at this trilogy, Pikmin 2 is kind of the black sheep. Again, not a bad game, but not nearly as compelling or replayable or magical as its predecessor or successor, for a number of reasons. So that's what we're gonna get into today. Why Pikmin 2 is the weakest one, in my humble opinion that you can feel free to disagree with. And as is the norm for a lot of my somewhat negative slanted reviews, let's start out with the good stuff. One of Pikmin 2's best new additions is that of a second character to control, meaning it's a lot easier to multitask and divide your Pikmin squad up to do different tasks, since you can easily switch between captains on different sides of the map. Plus, having two characters means this is the perfect co-op experience. Oh, wait, what's that? There's no co-op in the main campaign? You implemented co-op into the game via the side modes, but not the main story for some reason? Oh, okay then. Whatever. Co-op is for pussies. And that was the end of it. Even if you can't bring a friend along to play the main campaign with, having two captains around is still really helpful in single player. And how about those new characters? Louis is such a funny piece of shit. He ruins everything and you just love to hate him. He's like the Manny Heffley of the Pikmin universe, and he's a great contrast to the ultra-capable Olimar. I love the implication that he hijacked the final boss's brain and that he's the one who's actually trying to kill you. Why would he do that? Cause he's a piece of shit, and I love that. But then, halfway through the game, Louis is replaced with the president of Hakatate Freight. And once I unlock this guy, I'm basically done with playing as Olimar for the rest of the game. The president is so funny, like look at him! Look at this scrunkly little silly Billy. He may be a filthy capitalist swine, but I like him anyway. He's a big ol' silly head. I also like how each of the captains have their own unique whistle. Olimar's got the OG traditional one, Louis has a train whistle, and the president has a fucking car horn. Such a cute little touch. This game also introduces purple and white Pikmin, which are both obviously very iconic and beloved additions to the franchise. I have my problems with how they were implemented, and a lot more problems with one of them in particular, but we'll get into that later. In general though, they were both good ideas and more than welcome inclusions to the series. Bulbmen are also such a delightful and creepy concept. I gotta give them props for thinking outside the box with this one. Fun stuff. Bring them back, Nintendo. Graphically, the game is gorgeous for its time. Despite being on the same system as the first game, Pikmin 2 looks far more vibrant and alive, making much better use of the GameCube's graphical capabilities and showing just how far you can push hardware between its launch window and near the end of its lifespan. The game also fixes a lot of the glitches the first one had, and the Pikmin have slightly better AI, which is definitely welcome. The red spray is a good addition, searching for treasures in the overworld is just as fun as ever, and the fact that said treasures are real world items this time around is really cute. It doesn't feel like product placement, it feels like items you discover in a post-apocalyptic Earth. I like how this game follows up on the little hints that this was Earth in the original. Part of me misses the subtlety of the original game's world, but at the same time, I like the creativity that stems from the types of treasures you'll discover. Especially when we get to see Olimar talk about them in what is easily my favorite part of the whole game. And one of my favorite parts of the whole series, the Piklopedia. I have poured literal hours into reading this thing. It's incredible. Olimar has descriptions of every single enemy and piece of treasure here, and they're just so delightful. They express so much more personality than any other Nintendo protagonist has ever had before. Did you know that Olimar teaches the Pikmin a song and dance routine in his spare time, and he considers a new career as a dance instructor when he gets home? Did you know that Olimar is the only member of his family with a highly refined taste in music? And he always wants to go out to karaoke, but none of his family members want to? Did you know that Olimar has been laughed at by his wife for having soft-hearted romantic thoughts? Did you know that he wants to feed his wife a tomato with stimulating pheromones in it? Did you know his son teases him for not being a true gamer? Did you know he considers deliberately completing the mission at a slower pace just to piss his boss off and cause him indigestion? Indigestion. Did you know that he considers managers to be inhuman, heartless villains? Did you know that he considers his children to be his life's work? Did you know that he canonically smokes weed at one point? What? I could go on for way longer about all the treasure descriptions I love, but I gotta stop at some point. Not only are so many of Olimar's descriptions and interpretations of these familiar Earth items super funny, and not only do they reveal new aspects of his character, making him far more layered than most Nintendo protagonists could ever dream of being, but they're just really relaxing to read. Olimar's prose is so elegant and well written, and you can just get lost in his words as this relaxing music plays to accompany him. I genuinely can't get enough of these journal entries. They're just so reassuring and nice to peruse. Oh, and don't worry all you 3 Louie fans out there, cause he gets in on the fun too. Instead of having scientific observations on every enemy in the game, Louie just talks about how he would cook them. That's actually hilarious. So yeah, the Piklopedia gets a 12 out of 10. The rest of the game isn't as good though, let's talk about that now. The most immediately apparent downgrade to talk about when comparing Pikmin 1 to Pikmin 2 is the story. Pikmin 1 offers a simple narrative that nonetheless manages to hook you throughout the entirety of the admittedly very short game. Olimar crash lands on the Pikmin planet. His life support system will fail him in 30 days. He needs to rebuild his ship by then, or else he'll die a horrible, tragic death and never see his family again. The stakes are extremely high, and they make you want to see Olimar's quest through to the end. It's a really compelling motivation. A classic story of survival. Pikmin 2, meanwhile, has crippling debt. Olimar returns home after the events of the first game, only to find out that his company, Hakatate Freight, yes, I pronounce it Hakatate, I don't care what Palutena says.
Hokatate? Shut up!
Is now in debt. The new employee, Louie, lost a bunch of carrots during a shipment, the president gobbles a bunch of imaginary dicks, and now you owe the government $10,000. The president sells off your ship to partially repay the loan, which is cool. I love the fact that the ship we painstakingly rebuilt over the course of the previous game is now just gone. That's awesome. But as it turns out, a bottle cap souvenir Olimar brought back for his son is worth some money. So the president immediately sends you back to the Pikmin planet with Louie in order to collect more random items that they can sell and repay the loan with. Olimar doesn't even get a chance to see his family again. He's immediately shipped back off to the planet he almost died on. I know the Pikmin series isn't an example of avant-garde storytelling, but doesn't this sour the ending of the first game a bit? You know, knowing that our quest to rebuild our ship and see our family again resulted in the ship immediately getting taken away from us, and the family reunion we fought so hard for getting postponed until after we went back to the hostile alien planet to get some Skippy's peanut butter. Well, Shirillis, you may be saying, obviously Nintendo is making a statement on how capitalism drains people of their lives and makes them unable to hold functioning relationships or accomplish anything outside of their work. I mean, sure, it sure is showing that. doesn't really explore it that much outside of Olimar complaining about his boss or his work schedule a few times in the Piclopedia. The fact that Olimar is forced to return to the Pikmin planet immediately in order to raise enough money to rectify Louis and the president's mistakes is just kinda cynical and depressing. Repaying the debt the company owes isn't a terrible motivation. I mean, it is satisfying to see the number of Pokos you owe go down. Plus, ultimately, the story is just supposed to be your excuse to experience the gameplay. But this is still incredibly weak compared to the first game, where story and gameplay worked hand in hand to drive you and make you want to experience each area and find each ship part. The collectibles in Pikmin 2 are cool and fun to come across, but they feel less rewarding to collect because the goal they're leading you towards is far less compelling. Missing a collectible in Pikmin 1 could be the difference between life and death. Missing a collectible in Pikmin 2? Who cares? You can make up those lost Pokos by killing some enemies in the dungeons. Nothing in Pikmin 2 feels all that urgent, and nowhere is that more evident than with the removal of the 30-day time limit. Now, I understand that this was a divisive aspect of the first game, and that the stress of getting everything done within 30 in-game days alienated a ton of players. But in my opinion, that's kind of the main appeal of the game. Pikmin wouldn't be Pikmin without that urgency, that drive to scrounge together whatever numbers of troops you can and find all the parts you're looking for. It's not really that challenging of a time limit. There are 30 days to collect 30 ship parts, 5 of which are optional. If you get 1 ship part per day, you're completely fine. But I don't know, I guess enough people didn't like it, so Nintendo decided to get rid of the time limit entirely in the next game. You can spend as many days as you need to repay the debt. But like, if that's the case, then what's the point of the day system? Why can't you just spend as much time as you want in an area if the number of days it takes you to complete a task doesn't amount to anything? You're probably saying, well, they can't just remove the day system because that's how the first game worked. And it wouldn't make sense if you could just spend infinite time in an area all of a sudden. But you can do that in the dungeons! Why does time freeze all of a sudden the moment you go underground? How does that make sense, Nintendo? Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. I should save this for later. Back to the story. It has no urgency since there's no time limit. If they wanted something less restrictive than what the first game had, Pikmin 3 figured it out with the juice system. Basically, you also have infinite days in Pikmin 3, unless you run out of your juice supply, which can be replenished by nabbing the game's main collectibles, fruit. Bada boom, there's still urgency, but there's also not a hard deadline to conform to. I know it's not really fair to fault Pikmin 2 for not doing something that its sequel got right, but at the same time, removing the time limit and the urgency entirely was such a massive miscalculation, and Nintendo really should have thought long and hard about the implications of doing this. Another aspect of the story that takes a hit is the little end-of-day monologues Olimar has in Pikmin 1. They're really atmospheric and reflective and often beautiful, and not in Pikmin 2 at all. Instead, they're replaced with emails from other characters, like the president, Louie's grandma, Olimar's family, a sex hotline. Don't get me wrong, some of these are nice in their own right. Like, I love the idea of hearing from Olimar's wife and kids, considering how much he talked about them in the first game. The president is a funny character, and some of the weirder messages are a delight as well. But in terms of being little ribbons to put on the end of each day, these just aren't as interesting or thematically appropriate as hearing Olimar's own thoughts, which are instead relegated to the Piclopedia. It's not the worst change, but it's still not as good as it was before. But Shisurla Farilla Sisis, none of this really matters that much. As long as the gameplay is still fun, that's all that matters. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess when you're out in the overworld exploring and discovering treasure with your Pikmin, it's still a fun time. But that's unfortunately only about 20% of the game. It's time to talk about the biggest problem with Pikmin 2 and my least favorite aspect of the game in general. The dungeons. I really cannot stand the dungeon system in Pikmin 2. At first, it seemed like a pretty cool way of expanding the world of the original Pikmin, but as the game goes on, it just becomes more and more mundane and miserable. Before we get to that, however, let's briefly discuss the overworld. I say briefly discuss because you're not going to be spending much time up here compared to underground. Pikmin 2 has 4 main areas, which at first glance seems like a step down from the original's 5, But considering how 2 of the 5 areas in the original were incredibly small, with one serving as a simple tutorial area and the other being little more than a final boss arena, I'd say the general landmass you explore between the 2 games is about the same size. Some of it is even about the same shape between the 2 games. Hey, wait a minute. Yeah, Pikmin 2 blatantly reuses the map layouts from Pikmin 1, and I'm pretty mixed about this. On the one hand, while the layouts are the same, the actual stuff you'll find in these familiar locations is different. And that's kinda cool because it showcases how ever-changing nature is. On the other hand, what, it changed this drastically between Olimar's round trip to Hakatate and back? I don't know, this planet's weird, I guess. More importantly though, the fact that only one overworld area in this game is completely original, and the other 3 are just remixed versions of areas from the first game? Yeah, I shouldn't have to explain why that's a bit disappointing. Again, these remixed versions feel different enough, and the game isn't trying to hide the fact that these are old areas, since they acknowledge that in the Piclopedia. But it's still easy to tell that corners were a bit cut here. But that's okay, because like I said, exploring and finding treasures in the overworld is only about 20% of the game. The vast majority of your playtime will be found in the brand new dungeon system. Basically, when exploring the overworld, you find a hole. You jump in the hole and discover that it's a multi-floor dungeon with a ton of treasure to find on nearly every floor. And a boss fight at the end that nets you a special collectible, which will usually enhance your character in some way. This sounds like a slam dunk of a feature, right? There's so much more to explore now than there was in the first game, so what could possibly go wrong? Oh, you know, just about everything, basically. First of all, aesthetics. You know how the overworld areas look gorgeous? Each one is based on one of the 4 seasons, and they all have the finest graphical fidelity you could achieve in 2004? Yeah, well, f*** all that. Let's explore some dank caves for the majority of the game. I really hate the look of a lot of these dungeons. It's like they took a look at the Forrest Navel, the ugliest area from Pikmin 1, and said, yeah, this is the aesthetic we need more of in the sequel, for some bizarre reason that scientists are still trying to uncover to this day. To be fair, even though this is the main look I remember from the dungeons, there are other visual themes at play here. Like rust.
Rust, I tell you!
There are some rusty dungeons, so that's nice and definitely not really ugly. There's also a shower floor theme, which still doesn't look the greatest. And okay, to be fair, there are some nice looking ones, like the snow-covered caves, or the ones that are designed to look like a child's play area. But for the most part, I really don't like the way these areas look, which is made even worse by the fact that you spend way more time here than you do in the pretty places. And sadly, my aesthetical preferences are the least of the dungeon's problems. There's also the logistical questions these mysterious time and space warping holes open up. There's a small issue of how is there daylight on certain floors of these underground caves? Like, could they try and be a little consistent there? But then there's the more major issue. As I mentioned earlier, time just doesn't progress at all when you're in the dungeons, which is so bizarre. Literally, how and why can you jump into one of these holes, spend as long as you want down there, and then pop out with no time passing in the overworld? They never make any attempt to acknowledge or explain this. I guess it would be too hard to justify time passing down there from a gameplay perspective, but it's so bizarre and it breaks the rules of the universe and the entire premise. Pikmin is supposed to be about time management, and yet the vast majority of this game completely forgoes this key element of the original. That's stupid. I know the time limit stressed a lot of players out, but maybe all that means is that real-time strategy games aren't for them. And that's okay. There's tons of other less stressful games for them to go play. You shouldn't feel the need to cater to people who don't like real-time strategy games by removing the real-time strategy elements of a real-time strategy series. I mean, that's just common sense, you know? I'm just so fundamentally disappointed with the kind of game Pikmin 2 chooses to be for the majority of its playtime. And the best part is, we're not even close to being done with this dungeon discussion. There's also the issue of how samey and repetitive the dungeons feel, especially as you play the game for longer and longer. Aesthetics do play a part here, like if you showed me footage of any of the dungeons, 90% of the time I would not for the life of me be able to tell you which dungeon it's from. There are a few exceptions, like Glutton's Kitchen looks pretty distinct, and there are certain areas that are themed around a particular enemy type, like the Citadel of Spiders or Snagret Hole. Sometimes the treasures you find in a certain dungeon can give it a unique feel, like how the Frontier Cavern has a Christmas theme going on. But even with these very minimal aesthetical differences, there's not really much to differentiate the dungeons from each other. From a gameplay perspective, each one is the exact same. There are different enemies and different hazards, but it always amounts to the same gameplay loop of grabbing treasure, killing any enemies in your way, and then moving on to the next floor where you just rinse and repeat. Not a single dungeon offers anything unique from a gameplay perspective compared to the others, but I played through all of them anyway, as if an actually cool unique gameplay mechanic would just fall right out of the sky. Ha ha, fall right out of the sky. Yeah, okay, so I was lying. There is actually one dungeon in this game with unique gameplay mechanics compared to all the others. The Submerged Castle. Not only is this the one dungeon in the game that restricts you to a certain type of Pikmin, in this case blues, but if you spend too much time on any floor in this place, you end up spawning the Water Wraith. A relentless, invincible hunter that wants nothing more than to steamroll you and your Pikmin, instantly killing them. Suddenly, time management matters again in one of the dungeons, and there's constant fear and tension. You want to grab the treasures and then get the fuck out as soon as possible before this unholy Lovecraftian horror shows up to massacre you and your beloved little troops. The background music is distorted and unnerving, perfectly reflecting this creature's bizarre, unexplained origins. And the eventual fight with it, where you finally get some purple Pikmin and use it to spook this thing into gaining a physical form, top notch. An excellent capper on this incredibly memorable horror-themed dungeon. It's so unique and cool, and probably my favorite part of the whole game. If the other dungeons had some sort of special gameplay hook like this one, then I'd be a lot more positive on the dungeon system and the game overall. But no, unfortunately, this is the one exception to the rule about all these dungeons feeling incredibly samey and generic. And believe it or not, after all that, we still haven't gotten to my single biggest issue with the dungeon system. You might have noticed that I haven't really talked about the level design of these dungeons yet, and there's a very good reason for that. You see, there is no level design. No, seriously, the floors of each dungeon are randomly generated.
Randomly generated? Randomly generated!
Each floor is always assigned specific treasures, enemies, and other goodies, but every time you reset your game, the layout of the floor will be different, and all of these elements will be in different spots. I honestly kinda hate this, quite frankly. It makes the layout so uninteresting because no human thought was put into the treasure locations on each floor. There can be enemies that are completely avoidable and pointless because the treasure ends up being nowhere near them. There could be walls to break down that just end up leading to dead ends. There could be treasures that spawn in the water that you can't get if you don't have enough blues, but then if you just reset the game, suddenly the treasure isn't in the water anymore. It all just feels so sloppy and honestly unfun. I know there's a ton of games with procedurally generated areas that are super popular, and I can obviously see the appeal of that sort of game, but I don't really think it works here since the randomization doesn't change the gameplay in any meaningful ways. You're always gonna find the exact same treasures and enemies on each floor. The only difference is that those treasures and enemies weren't paired with any coherent or compelling level design. Plus, even though some people might enjoy the fact that no two playthroughs of the same floor are exactly alike, I don't know, I don't really remember 90% of the floors on my previous playthrough, so why would I care if these forgettable areas have slightly different layouts the second time around? At the end of the day, I can only really categorize the dungeons in Pikmin 2 as a huge misfire and a massive step down from the open exploration present in the above ground areas. While they can be mindlessly fun on occasion, and while the Submerged Castle does at least offer a tantalizing taste of what could have been the design mission statement for all the dungeons, I nonetheless strongly disliked their inclusion, and I'm beyond thrilled that they removed them entirely from Pikmin 3. If you like them, there's no harm in that obviously, but just from my personal standpoint, they go against practically everything I love about the Pikmin series. The real-time strategy elements, the gorgeous environments, the push and pull between completing your main objective and trying to get your Pikmin numbers up. Since, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you can't grab more Pikmin while you're in these dungeons unless you stumble on one of these Pikmin multiplication flowers. Hope all your Pikmin don't die when you're down here. I mean, it's okay, I guess, because as long as you have a few purples, you can basically decimate any enemy in your path. That's so cool. Let's talk about difficulty now. Though, I guess I should preface this discussion with something that isn't difficult. Making a website using Squarespace, baby! Sheepie! Squarespace is a fantastic, intuitive, online website builder that allows you to create beautiful websites for your business or personal hobby. Present your work using Squarespace's professional portfolio designs. Display projects in customizable galleries and add password-protected pages to share private works with clients. You can even present your videos from YouTube, Vimeo, and Animoto on your Squarespace site. Add an image overlay to your video to improve your website's load speed by waiting to embed video players until playback starts. Every design automatically includes a unique mobile presence that matches the overall style of your website, so your content will look great on every device, every time. And if you don't want that, you can always disable the mobile view from Website Manager. Buying a domain from Squarespace is so simple because there are no hidden fees or price hikes. Each domain comes with an ad-free parking page and free WHOIS privacy on eligible domains. Squarespace sells over 200 top-level domains, so you can find the perfect name for your website. Choose a URL that ends in .com, .net, .org, or you can always get a more specific one like .art if you want to be fancy. If you're ready to share your passions or promote your business with the rest of the world, head to squarespace.com for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/ShapeForList to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Is Pikmin 2 too hard of a game or too easy of a game?
Yes!
Rather than being a well-balanced experience in terms of its difficulty, I feel like this game honestly just uses really cheap methods to make the game both easier and harder at the same time. I would say the harder stuff outweighs the easier stuff a bit, however, so let's talk about that first. This game is a fucking lunatic with the amount of difficult shit it throws at you. The number of insta-kill hazards has been dramatically increased from the first game, which is always fun and makes the game feel totally fair and enjoyable. That was a lie. I was lying. They suck. I guess the least egregious of the new insta-kill hazards would be electricity, since it's always easy to spot and you can plan ahead and not take your Pikmin near it. Even so, if you end up near an electric gate with any Pikmin who aren't yellow, zap! Insta-death. It does at least give yellows a lot more tangible use than they had in the first game, but it still feels like a cheap new addition regardless. Speaking of uses for yellows, remember bomb rocks? Those cool but pretty dangerous items yellows could pick up in the first game in order to kill enemies and tear down walls? Well, guess what? They don't work for you anymore. Now they're just insta-kill hazards that are dropped by the new, incredibly annoying careening Dirigibug enemy. Or better yet, they can just fall right out of the sky! Ha ha! Fall right, I wanna die. Of course, bombs randomly spawning out of the sky is actually rather generous compared to some of the other shit the sky can spew out. At least the bombs have a timer for you to get away from them. Try that shit with giant insta-kill rocks. Good luck making sure your entire squad of 100 Pikmin gets away from the huge looming rock shadow. Oh, and you know what else can pop out of the sky? Entire enemies, including some really dangerous ones. Aw, you shouldn't have, Pikmin 2. The traps on these dungeon floors are fucking absurd, and they don't feel like they were fairly balanced in the slightest. They instead feel like cheap ways of artificially upping the difficulty through unfair Pikmin deaths. And they're made even worse by the fact that the areas you encounter them in are so cramped and tight that it's incredibly difficult for your entire squad to avoid these hazards. The best strategy is usually to take Olimar with just a few Pikmin or none at all, and walk into every corner of the floor in order to trigger all the traps before exploring it the normal way. And, I don't know, that just kinda seems incredibly tedious and not how this sort of game should be designed. There's other annoying elements, like the abundance of bottomless pits in certain floors that'll make it incredibly difficult to fight enemies that shake Pikmin off of you. Then there's enemies like the Bull Bear, a roided out Bulborb who's incredibly difficult to kill, and the Gatling Groink, who laser death beams your Pikmin at any opportunity. And it almost seems random whether they'll just get stunned or insta-killed. Now, these enemies wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, except some twisted fuck at Nintendo decided, hey, what if when you kill these guys, they can come back to life after a short time, meaning you now have to worry about dragging their carcasses back to your ship so they don't come back for revenge. Whoa, that's not extremely annoying at all. Thank you so much, Nintendo guy. Now, you might be thinking, well, Shambapaloopalathasis, it sounds like you're just bad and you don't like hard games. Nah man, I don't mind hard games as long as the challenge is fair and well designed. Metroid Dread kicked my ass, but for the most part it felt fair. Like I always felt like I could beat the bosses if I adapted to their attack patterns and played more carefully, which is exactly what I did. Pikmin 2 isn't like that because the challenge often stems from random insta-kill elements, which feels far more frustrating than fun. And yet, despite all of that, there's still an argument to be made that this is the easiest Pikmin game. Not just because of the non-existent time limit, but because of the existence of everything purple. Let's start with Purple Spray. One of the new features added to Pikmin 2 are these special berry plants with little red and purple berries. If you take enough of these berries back to your ship, you can get red and purple spray. The red one is used to temporarily power up your Pikmin, making them faster and stronger. This is a pretty good and balanced addition to the gameplay of the series, and it even returned in Pikmin 3, so clearly the developers were happy with it as well. But then there's the purple spray. Use this on enemies and they instantly turn to stone, meaning you're free to annihilate them before they break out. While it's pretty fun to do this to an obnoxious enemy giving you trouble, it's also incredibly cheap and lame. Turns out the best way to deal with a ball bear or Gatling Groink is to just not engage with them at all. Turn them to stone and wail on them. They won't even leave a body behind, so you don't even have to worry about them coming back to life. How nifty! Look, I really do appreciate that there's an easy way to dispose of these obnoxious twats, but this kinda just feels like an automatic win button. It's just not really fun for this to be the most practical solution to deal with these guys. The worst part about Purple Spray is that you can just farm obscene amounts of it by spending in-game days collecting purple berries, basically rendering most enemy encounters null and void. If there was a reasonable cap on the amount of purple spray you could hold at a time, like somewhere between 5 to 10 uses of it, then it might be a fair and worthwhile inclusion. But instead, it's absurdly game-breaking, and I'm glad they took it out when making Pikmin 3. Also, it makes a burp sound effect, and I don't like that. But the purple spray doesn't even hold a candle to the absolute size of this absolute unit, the purple Pikmin. Look, I love purples. I really do. Purple is my favorite color. And like, look at this little chunky boy. He's so cute. Oh my god. I think it's a good idea to bring in a new type of Pikmin that can carry more weight than a normal Pikmin, albeit at a much slower pace. That's pretty nice and well balanced. Unfortunately, balance goes out the window entirely when talking about combat. Purple Pikmin essentially invalidate every other type during most enemy encounters. Remember Bulborbs? Remember how they were kinda dangerous in Pikmin 1 if you didn't kill them immediately when bum rushing them or throwing Pikmin on their back? Or how about Wollywogs, one of the most deadly enemies to encounter in Pikmin 1 because of their insta-kill ground slam attack? Yeah, well, in Pikmin 2 it's easy. Just throw a couple purples on these guys and you're fine. They go down super easily. It's kind of embarrassing, really. And you can employ this strategy of just chucking some purples on most enemies in the game. Even ones where it would seem like other Pikmin would be better for it. Whoa, fiery blowhogs? This looks like a job for the reds who are immune to fire. Actually, no, the purples managed to kill him in the time it took me to say that sentence. Little electric beetles? The yellows would be pretty good for actually no, as long as they're not actively shooting electricity. You can kill these beetles a lot quicker and easier with purples. And not only are the purples super good at wearing most enemies down super quickly, but they have a chance of stunning enemies when they land, meaning all the baddies can do is sit there helpless as the purples stomp them into the dust. It's really lame. It makes nearly every enemy encounter so brain dead since you don't have to engage with them in any meaningful or strategic ways. All you need to do is chuck purples onto them and bada boom, they're dead. There are a few enemies that you still need the normie Pikmin for, like the fiery Bulborb that requires reds, or any enemies you encounter in the water. But there's not nearly enough of them to take away from the purple palooza that makes up most combat encounters in this game. Also, I found footage of purples managing to kill a fiery Bulborb just fine without dying, so I retract my statement about reds being required for them. There really is no f***ing use for reds anymore. Thanks so much, purples. But Shimbapaloopa Rafalupa Ralasis, you may be saying, you were just complaining about how hard the game is. Why aren't you welcoming this thing that makes it so much easier? Well, because this isn't really addressing most of the cheap shit the game throws at you in order to raise the difficulty through the roof. Yeah, purple Pikmin are helpful at dealing with annoying enemies like the Bulbear and Gatling Groink, but they can't do a thing against the cheap traps that fall from the sky in just about every dungeon. They make it so one half of the gameplay is insanely easy baby shit, while the other half is merciless slaughter. And like, call me crazy, but I don't consider that to be good difficulty balancing. Both are frustrating in their own unique ways. And if you want to remove the easiness by just not using the purples in combat, then congrats! You're playing fair against the game, but the game isn't playing fair back. Since now you get to deal with insanely difficult bullshit enemies on top of the other bullshit that you can't do anything about. But do you want to know the most annoying thing about all of this? at least from my perspective. I don't know if this is something that gets on most Pikmin 2 players' nerves. Or maybe it is. I guess you guys can let me know in the comments. But the aspect of this game that irritates me more than anything is a single one of its 200 treasures, and the criteria needed to collect it. So, here's the thing about purples and whites. You can't get them the normal way, where you carry pellets or enemies back to an onion. Nah. These Pikmin are special. You can only get them in the dungeons when you find one of these candy pop buds. Toss a Pikmin of any color in, and they come out as purple or white. Since this is the only way to get these Pikmin types, your numbers of them probably aren't going to be as large as your red, blue, and yellow numbers. Now, you'd think this would be a good way to balance purples since they're rarer and you can't get a ton of them. But no, it doesn't really balance them since you don't need a ton of purples to kill an enemy. And even if you have a large squad of purples, they're still slow and can't deal with hazards, meaning you still need the other Pikmin for non-combat encounters, and most people wouldn't take a full large squad of purples with them as a result. So, since this whole candy pop bud bullshit doesn't do anything for the game balance, I kinda wish these guys got their own dedicated onions instead of spawning from limited underground flowers and getting shoved in the ship's hull at night. Especially because of what a detriment the candy pop bud system is when trying to get the Doomsday apparatus. This rusty old shake weight right here is the bane of my existence whenever I replay this game, because it requires 100 purple Pikmin to carry. You're not gonna get 100 purple Pikmin over the course of playing the game normally. Even if none of your purples die along the way, there just aren't enough candy pop buds when you play through all the dungeons for the first time to reach this number. And not every candy pop bud respawns after being used for the first time, meaning you can't just go to a simple 2-floor dungeon in order to grind purple Pikmin. The Pikmin Wiki recommends that you go all the way down to the 8th floor of the subterranean complex in order to grind on those purple candy pop buds over and over again to reach 100. Let's say you have 40 purples, since a lot of them inevitably died to some traps or stronger enemies. You can only get 15 purples each trip to the subterranean complex, and you need 60 purples. So you essentially have to trudge through 36 dungeon floors you've already beaten, watching the same cutscenes and loading screens that you've already seen hundreds of times through normal gameplay, until you finally have enough purples to get this godforsaken wait, the retrieval of which takes a quarter of your day up because of how slow the purples are, all as you can't do anything else but wait because the maximum number of Pikmin you can have in the field is 100. Who the f thought this shit up? Turn on your location. I just want to feed you to a burrowing snagret. This one treasure makes it so I never want to lose a single purple because it might mean an extra trek through 8 floors of the goddamn subterranean complex that I've already beaten. Essentially, every time I lose a purple on one of these dungeon floors, I just reset because doing the floor over again is far less painful than the slog of trying to get that purple back later. And if none of your purples die, which none of mine did thanks to the handy dandy reset button, you'll still only have around 65 purples by the time you clear out all the dungeons. Meaning you still have 3 subterranean complex treks to get through no matter what. Yay! And sure, the Doomsday apparatus isn't required to beat the game, but if it's a Pikmin game, I need 100% completed. I'm sorry, that's just how I am. I need the Piklopedia filled out no matter the cost. So yeah, this single treasure has a huge detriment on the gameplay since it forces you to be paranoid about your use of purples and make sure that none of them die, lest you be subjugated to a truly awful, monotonous grind. And if this discourages you from using the purples in combat in order to preserve them, then congratulations! Your reward is dealing with some truly nightmarish enemies without your greatest asset against them. Oh, but don't worry! If you don't want to use your one purple automatic win button, you can always use the other one! Turn them to stone and kick their asses! Who gives a shit anymore? Why is this game like this? I don't want to play it anymore. Can we just stop? Let's stop the video. Alright, that's enough. That's enough, I'm done. Alright, we're done. Look, at the end of the day, Pikmin 2 is still a Pikmin game. It's still fun to raise up your numbers of these little guys and discover the various treasures the world has to offer. The music and the graphics are really good and atmospheric, and the game is just oozing with personality, both in the gameplay itself and the optional side content available for you to read, which is honestly my favorite part of the whole game. It's a pretty fun time, but it's also insanely flawed in so many areas, and it just doesn't live up to its predecessor or successor in my eyes. Yeah, it's the longest Pikmin game with the most collectibles, but so what? When so much of its runtime is padded out by droll, visually repetitive dungeons with non-existent level design, do you really expect me to be enthusiastic to complete it when Pikmin 1 and 3 offer shorter but perfectly paced bursts of fun with no dull moments and impeccable gameplay? Do you really expect me to be motivated by a desire to clean up my idiot boss and coworkers' mess, rather than a desire to survive and see my family again or save my homeworld from starvation? Do you expect me to appreciate such a sloppy difficulty zigzag that violently swerves between being piss easy and unbearably difficult, when the other two games manage a much smoother difficulty curve throughout? You see why I consider this to be the black sheep of the main series? It has a lot of good things going for it, and I still do like it. But when it's sandwiched between two legitimate masterpieces that both stand as some of my favorite games of all time, yeah, it's pretty damn weak in comparison. But let me know what you guys think. I know this one is a lot of people's favorite, and I can totally respect that opinion. So if you think that way, feel free to share your reasons why. Good night, PNF 404. I'm gonna go watch the Pikmin 4 teaser for the 897th time.